the Trump administration is running around, like a horse in a hospital, and who knows?
My God.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to Collateral Banter, episode 56. I'm here with the hosts of Civil Politics. Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome. Hello.
Do you want to introduce yourselves quickly?
Always. Listen to those dulcet tones. Who wouldn't want to listen to more from me,
Mike,
Michael Dow?
It's not your show. It's not your show.
But
It's okay, Michael.
It's not your show.
but there's a microphone and it's on.
And you paid for that microphone. No, I'm just kidding. No, you did not.
Didn't,
This is
actually.
all nonprofit. It's volunteer.
Yeah, we're recording. I'm Michael Dow. I'm the host, blabbermouth for Civil Politics, and we're actually recording this in the studios of Valley Free Radio, WXOJLP 103.3 FM out of Northampton. Just done our show, and now Danny is
Causing trouble.
in the driver's seat.
That's what I do.
So I'm gonna actually take my hands off the wheel and let Danny, whoever.
Jesus. Wow. That's my name from now on. I wanted to know.
Are you the Messiah?
How did this get started? I am. And that is a show also on Netflix, but how did Civil Politics get started? 2015.
I am
I've been
not
following.
the person to ask because I was brought on board. So
Okay.
He's the pretty face and the talent. So
It's one of those things. I'll let you decide which one. Should I go into it, Sue, or do you want to?
no, go for it, John.
Okay. I'm Genre. I am the engineer, producer of Civil Politics, run the board, and keep these two in line.
Imagineer, isn't that in your title?
Wow. Imagineer. Okay.
Vizier, I think.
Imagineer.
Much better. In 2014, there were a couple political shows on Valley Free Radio at that time, but I always wanted to do a show that was like Crossfire, but not with jerks. That's it. That's what I talked to.
And you made an exception. Sorry.
Womp womp. Yeah, that's how I talked to Sue and Stefan about it. Stefan is another producer at Valley Free Radio. He does I can't believe I'm blanking on the name right now.
Warm Heart of Africa?
Warm Heart of Africa, and he plays Afro pop, and it is really cool. So Warm Heart of Africa, it's Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on Valley Free Radio. So we're going to just keep pumping that, by the way.
Awesome.
So we were talking, me, Sue, and Stefan were talking about it, and we had a few meetings about like what we wanted to do, how we wanted to approach this, and we wanted to have varied opinions. We were trying to think of like who around town we should have on, who would have a good banter and everything like that, because Stefan is more left. I'm an independent, but I've gradually gone very far left over the years. And
Recent years?
yeah,
Yeah.
actually, we can talk about that later if you want. And Sue is more on the right. So
Card-carrying Republican lifetime.
literally card carrying,
okay.
yeah. So I didn't know how
Check
much
her
you wanted to
wallet.
go into it. So
And I also have that gun carry thing, too. So, yeah.
So we talked about how we want to approach it and everything like that, and then we decided like, why don't we do it? Not like, because we were thinking bringing other people in, writing to like newspapers and something like that, and then we basically like convinced Sue to come on the air.
Yeah, I wasn't going to do it, but
Sue was not about it, but we were like, please, you're so awesome, please. So,
well, and I do a show Farm to Fork on this station, too.
that's right.
So it's sort of interesting to have that. That's an interest of mine, but I love politics. And to have a civil forum, I mean, that was... You just don't hear that on the air.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
And it was before Trump. So when Trump hit, I mean, it was sort of like, can we even do this?
Yeah. Like 2015, we went on the air in October. The whole point was, and when we came up with that name, like that was, I think we came up with the name like pretty quickly.
Yeah, we had like 30 variations.
Yeah.
And like it was the first word and the last word that, talking politics. And
So
all
we
this.
actually like,
None of us loved the name, but it was like, That's pretty good.
Little did we know the meaning of civil was going to become so.
It's
Controversial.
exactly. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing. We wanted a show where we could talk about politics, where we could have disagreements, where we could talk about what's going on in the world without jumping down each other's throats, because everybody wants the best for the country and the world.
You believe that?
No, I was just about to say most people want the best for the country and the world. Like, even if people disagree about how, like, some people say, oh, I think lower taxes is better because it gives people money. It's like, okay, but I think higher taxes is okay because we can give people healthcare through the government. The government's blah blah blah, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the point.
That is politics.
That's the point
heart
of
that
exactly.
debate. Yeah.
That's the point of how our country is run.
Yeah.
We have a very adversarial system.
Right.
That is how we should approach things. So when we were developing the show, we really wanted it to be civil and be an example of how people can talk about politics without rancor and without being angry about it. So hopefully we've succeeded in that.
What I've listened to, definitely, and I think it's interesting because the internet itself, at least social media, and I think in the last few years, encourages the opposite of civil politics. In many ways, if you start screaming at somebody, you have a show where you're yelling and fighting back and forth, it gets downloads and sells. If that's your only goal is numbers,
Especially
go
in,
uncivil.
like, YouTube.
YouTube, the things you can say, make extreme statements. The truth, data, wherever you're getting from, that stuff doesn't matter. It's about emotion. You know, that's what attracted me to the show that you guys have on the radio and elsewhere, is hearing that, there is something like civil out there and discussing politics.
I should say, Civil Politics airs on Valley Free Radio at 7 p.m. on Fridays every week, 7 to 8, and you can also listen on civilpoliticsradio.com, and we have links to we're on every podcast network.
Nice.
So after you're done listening to this one, after you've caught up or you listen to Collateral Banter all the time, clearly you do. We know you do. And if this is your first show, you want to listen to more. After that, then you can download Civil Politics.
Absolutely.
Just an hour, and it's just three friends talking about politics. I mean, we literally go out to dinner afterwards and continue talking about politics.
Oh, I can imagine. And some of those conversations are probably just as good, if not better, than what you said on air.
I think so.
Some of it's less edited because, we're not on the air.
We're supposed to edit this?
Well, where we go out to dinner, sometimes the people in the other booths have come over to us about
times.
when they finish their dinner and go, I heard what you said, and I agree with you, or I don't think you're right, or, so it's kind of
Where
funny.
is this?
So we go
That's awesome.
we go to a diner locally, and it's
Can you imagine being a Republican in Northampton?
I can imagine that being difficult. You tell people you're an independent, right? That's I think is how it goes. No,
Sue
it's
has
It can
is
be difficult for
fearless
you,
about that.
apparently.
And
yeah,
it's
certainly. I can understand that.
I'm always inspired by how Sue is just fearless about, like, saying, no, this is who I am. And it's really, and there is, like you've talked about, there can be issues, but
huge issues.
Anytime I think about them, like, and people are going, Republicans. I'm like, no, I know Republicans that are great and that are my friends, and they're not all like Mitch McConnell or something. Like I said, the way that you approach conservatism is
The right way,
very good.
Free markets
Very
are good.
The right way. But it's inspiring to me. It really
today,
is.
many conservatives, maybe like yourself, Sue, that don't really find a home in the Donald
they're
Trump
very
Republicans.
careful.
They're very careful how far they can go, especially if they're elected and they have to go back. So this is what I've said in a couple episodes: is if I was a Republican in office today, I would be very fearful to go against Donald Trump because you're worried. You want to stay in power. That's a thing. So, like, how you thread that line, when do you stand up and when you don't, it must be a difficult challenge because politics is about sustaining your power, especially when you're elected and you're a representative and you like your job and you want to continue to do it.
Well, look at Mitt Romney. I was surprised that he really dared do that because he's going to be trashed.
And was threatened, according to the conference.
I'm sure.
There. But I will give him this too. Before Donald Trump won the nomination, Mitt Romney gave, I thought, one of the strongest rebukes to Donald Trump's nomination. And during the primary, I mean, he stood up there and just attacked him relentlessly. And it didn't work. Donald Trump won the nomination. But
then he then he went to have dinner.
Then he went to have dinner. It was just like, oh.
Please don't
see
do that.
See, that's the thing about Mitt Romney that like he has those moments of like I'm voting against him, I'm rebuking him, I have a lot of values against, and then he's like, can I be Secretary of State? Yeah. That's why we had a show about. I said this on a show before on civil politics. I think that he's lawful neutral. He's not lawful good.
Yeah.
I don't know how geeky your listeners are.
No, go ahead.
But he's in it to be senator or governor or whatever. He molds himself into the role that he needs to be in.
He's a very careful man.
He is, and he's a very smart man and strategic. And I'm sure that he looked at his numbers in Utah and his numbers nationally and what would happen if he voted against the president. That's where he went.
Yeah, but you got another 4 years, right? So
he's exactly. Like he can ride that out,
right?
And he can't be recalled. There was like, oh, we should recall him. You can't recall him. That's not a thing.
See, I have a different opinion than you do, but my opinion is that he probably went home because his wife, is sick and has MS, and his 5 sons, and I imagine that they had quite the conversation because they're getting Trump trash. They're getting harassed and harangued, and
I look back on that. I got to say, I did enjoy the Schadenfreude of watching Mitt Romney look like an idiot for trying to have supper with Trump. And
he looked awful, didn't he? He looked like Chris Christie standing on the podium behind Trump when he endorsed him. Yeah, that look of
fear and terror and
mortification. And
but I do this.
I read it at the time, and I think given what we've seen of him before and since, I think there was a certain element of Mitt Romney. In a way, I think a good adjective for Mitt Romney is patrician, and he has a sense of sort of noblesse oblige. When one has been blessed as one has been by one's almighty and loving God, one has an obligation to give back to the community, and of course, as a prominent and wealthy citizen, one should give back. As a leader, as a mentor, and an elder in the community, and a statesman. And he's not wrong to think that Donald Trump is none of those things, and that it would be very good for the United States to have a Secretary of State who could at least take a stab at that kind of approach. Yeah. Which, whatever else you want to say about Mitt Romney, he's much better at being a thoughtful diplomatic statesman than Donald Trump
has been.
It's a low bar, but he clears it.
A trench.
You don't think he's a vulture capitalist?
He is a vulture capitalist. He is a vulture capitalist. But, But that doesn't mean vulture capitalism is not incompatible with maintaining a good relationship with our allies around the world and maintaining trade agreements and things like that.
It's parallel to that. You need that to be a capitalist.
Absolutely. And many people, I think, level valid criticisms of the United States and its foreign policy and drone strikes and supporting the Saudi government and its massacres in Yemen and sort of sticking an oar in to help topple Gaddafi but not really having a plan for what to do next, and our long history of...
That was NATO.
Our long history of toppling governments in South America and all around the world. Yeah, the Shah of Iran. So, Mossadegh, So all of that. So, obviously there's a lot of criticism to go around. It is worth noting that we've managed to avoid having a horrendous global conflict like we had in the 1940s since then. It's unusual to have this much peace, the European Union, for example, sort of this long-term project of tearing down borders and building communities. So
one sense I agree with you. Yeah. I get what you're saying, but at the other part of my brain says, I think what you're missing is how the nature of war has changed. We've seen like a conflict that is now not like it was prior, right? Between states, it's like...
Well, it can be between proxies, and some of them don't even have to be state proxies.
Right.
But Absolutely. There's a lot of horrific violence in the world, and the United States is pursuing policies that are killing people and that are damaging our planetary ecosystem and that are going to have negative consequences. All of that is true. On the other hand, it is nice to not have another global conflict
like World War III.
Well, or like even if no nuclear weapons are involved, something that is on a similar scale to World War II, because that would kill even more people. Because even our conventional quote unquote weapons are so much better than they were in World War II.
See, I think you're too focused on the Western world, and I look at the Middle East and what's going on, and I think there is worldwide conflict. It's just
there
it's
is, but
pockets
it's been tamped down, and one of the reasons why I think things are getting worse is because we've had bad Republican presidents who totally don't understand, totally misunderstood the idea of like we have these arrangements and these international cooperative organizations and whatnot precisely to keep this sort of thing from spiraling out of control. And I'm not trying to defend like, yay, NATO is wonderful. There is nothing at all problematic about our alliance with Israel. Hooray! But there's a reason why we have an agreement to defend Taiwan, and a reason why we still have troops in South Korea. And those military arrangements have saved lives, I think. I think they have prevented terrible wars from breaking out. And the Trump administration is running around, like a horse in a hospital, and who knows? Yeah, and who knows what's going to happen? So the idea that Mitt Romney could be provide something resembling stable continuity at that post, I get why he decided it was worth having dinner with President Trump.
People thought that in the beginning, right? That these stable people would.
Clearly, that was wrong.
Yeah. Now it's
a
Pompeo.
horse in the hospital. I love that. I'm sorry.
John Mulaney reference, yeah.
Yeah.
So Mitt Romney, I got to say, I'm genuinely impressed because, he's a vulture capitalist, and the kind of country club entitled conservative who pulled himself up by his own bootstraps with a modest $2 million loan from his parents kind of thing. Like,
wait, you didn't get a $2 million loan from your parents? No, just kidding.
Wasn't a
$10
loan.
million. It wasn't a loan.
No,
when I got out of college, my parents didn't have $2 million.
They didn't have to.
Yeah,
so no.
No, they're spending his inheritance now.
Well, yeah, we kind of are, but
that's another story we won't cover.
So
it's worth it to keep my mom alive. But let me just say this, and then please, Sue. But Mitt Romney actually had a moment where he said, "No, I will go this far and no further." And that sense of there is a limit to what I'm willing to do to get what I want. There is such a thing as enough and no further that I think you need to see more of in all kinds of actors in American life, but especially our prominent political figures and our business leaders. I mean, a big part of why our country is screwed up is the really, really rich people don't really know what the word enough means. If there's more money to be had, they want it, and if it means a pile of corpses, so long as they don't actually have to wade through it, that's fine.
How do you wade through a pile of corpses?
Same way you dive, you swim in Scrooge McDuck's money vault, metaphorically.
I don't know if there can be limits to capitalism, but we can debate that another day and another.
Well,
I want to hear from.
That's a lesson I got from my father, who was an investment banker. He's like, you can make a lot of money in banking, but the system flows through, and you sort of maintain the flow of money around, and you help people invest their money wisely, and you aren't trying to make a killing. You're just skimming off the cream from the top, and you let the cream pile up, and you wind up with a dairy, and it's great. Don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. Just be like, hey, we got enough.
Now I want ice cream.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And one of the reasons why my dad had a difficult career in the 80s and 90s, not that anybody really cares, but I mean, is he had fights with people, other executives at the banks he worked at in Boston about, well, what do we do? What is our goal? And he's like, if we serve our clients well, like the fees they pay us, we'll be making millions of dollars. And they're like, yeah, but we could be making tens of millions of dollars. And he's like, What's wrong with millions?
See, that's the thing
Yeah.
about shareholder capitalism is that like the system would not function if all of a sudden people thought there was enough, right? It's like every year the CEOs talk to the board of directors and shareholders, and they're instructed like, what are you doing to cut costs? What are you doing to increase market share? What are you doing to increase profit margins? And every year it's never like, wow, you've increased profit margins by 90%. Great job. You don't need to increase it by 100% next year or more.
I think our financial system could work just fine without that attitude, but the people who are in those seats of power to call the shots, they make more money personally. So, and what do they care about? More money for themselves.
I mean, we're talking about financing and stuff. Like, I know that Sue. I wanted to hear what Sue thought about like what we were talking about, like with
It's all right. I'm
capitalism.
female. You guys can just talk over me. It's okay.
Don't tell us that. We'll take you.
I'll let you talk over me for hours.
Jeez.
Leftists don't do that.
Did you hear what Nancy Pelosi said? They were talking over in a Trump meeting. This was early on, and she said, I happen to be the chairman of whatever the committee was, or the Speaker of the House. So the woman isn't allowed to speak?
Wasn't it for like healthcare or like
yeah, she totally silenced
like
them.
a women's
Talking
abortion
about
or something?
Women's health care.
It was all
Yeah.
men. It was all men in the room. Yeah.
I love
Womp womp.
I love that when people are talking about issues that affect me and you.
Oh, right, you and me. Yeah.
It's only like middle-aged white guys.
That's
I'm black, by the
mansplaining,
way.
isn't it? Isn't mansplaining? So what I wanted to say about Mitt Romney, I disagree with you on him going for the Secretary of State's job or any job.
That's fine.
I think basically he was this is the president, he's invited me to dinner. This is what you do when you're a gentleman. And that's why he had a look on his face the way he did. But that's my opinion. I just think that it was just purely being a gentleman in a circumstance where it was pretty untenable.
I think we kind of agree on that, actually. I didn't say it that way, but I think maybe you've said it better.
Trump's grin on that face, though.
Oh, he
like
loves
a
enjoyed
jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah,
every moment of it.
Disgusting.
yeah.
So I wanted to ask you this. This was a question that was burning inside of me, and it's a question I've been thinking about for months and maybe years. Is how did the United States of America get to this situation, to this point? Like, what events or things? Like, how did we get to 2020 with Donald Trump as president?
How long is your podcast?
Usually it's like 30 to 40 minutes. Some are very short. Some can go longer.
So we're gonna do like a 15-part.
I can
series
break. I
or
can
something?
break. Yeah. We deal with the small questions really. It's a question I feel like because we're in the day-to-day fight with what's happening in Congress with Donald Trump and all this other things and what's going on around the world. I begin to ask myself questions like, wait. How did we get here? So what my theory is, and I'll just throw it out there, is a couple things. So I'm writing a paper on it. So there is the 2008 economic crisis, and I think we're living with the lingering effects of that. I think the second issue is I think technology has done not just disruptions in the business world, but have disrupted democracy and the institutions that democracy depends on. And then I think the third thing is essentially the changing nature of war, and I think this is connected to technology. And I think that changing nature has we've gone from concentrated power, concentrated institutions like the state, corporations, and now there is this sort of movement against concentrated power. And I don't know how all those pieces fit. There are more pieces that I'm not saying that got us to this. There could also be a change in demographics in the country, right? The country is becoming less white. So there's a lot that is all coming, that is like joint together, but there are a lot of changes that I'm thinking kind of from a macro perspective. I don't know. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there as kind of a...
One thing I wanted to, before you guys go, I wanted to bring up an author that was on Civil Politics.
Crisis Sequence.
Yeah. There's an author that was on
Cedric de Leon.
Thank you very much. He wrote Crisis When Political Parties Lose the Consent to Rule. And
Good book.
Yeah, he's a professor at UMass Amherst. And he made some very good points about going back to the Civil War, how the Civil War started, the reasons why the Civil War started, and how that impacted the people then, and how that is mirrored right now. We had him on December 13th. So if you go to civilpoliticradio.com, you can listen to that. But Crisis When Political Parties Lose the Consent to Rule. I can give you the link afterwards.
Cool.
So that
He touched on a lot of the points
He
you
did.
just raised.
he really did, yeah.
And the way if I remember correctly, because the brain is old, the way he tied them together was that when you have sort of all these things coming together like this, you can either make it better or you can make it worse, and that the parties right now are making it worse, in that they're almost driving a wedge instead of trying to fix it. And it's sort of what happened in the Civil War, that it could have gone the other way, but then people started to demonize each other. But it's much more it's complicated, like you just laid it out with the 8 or 9 factors you just listed. But it's sort of that, why do the parties do that sometimes? Sometimes why do they just keep throwing gas on it and setting it on fire, instead of doing, the opposite, like a Roosevelt who sort of beat up on the companies, and, the first Roosevelt and then the second Roosevelt, that tried to help people who were struggling and tried to get rid of the fear. I mean, instead of inflaming the fear, cool the fear. And why are we inflaming the fear? Why did we vote? I didn't vote for him, but why did we vote for Trump? Why did we want a fearmonger? What was that? Why was that? And I don't think he really answers the why.
Okay. And I just love to add, can continue on to what you're saying, Sue, is it's happening to many other countries around the world at the same time. They've elected a leader very much in the mold of Trump, who loves Trump. And Trump, he's an idol to Trump. Trump looks at him like, I'm following, that's my hero. That's
my mini-me.
Yeah, he really likes Bolsonaro.
Bolsonaro, absolutely. But you know what? Not just Brazil, the Philippines. Another country, Duterte.
Who,
Modi,
by the way, Michael Bloomberg has been saying nice things about, too.
Really?
Wait,
Where did he get the idea of, like, hey, we should be killing drug dealers?
What? Oh, the killing drug. Okay. That's what I said.
Oh, yeah, the extrajudicial killings.
But then you have Modi in India. You have, Israel, and people can look at each individual country and say there are different factors in each of these countries.
Erdogan
and then Hungary. Actually, I think Putin, exactly. But I think one of the most interesting figures that I've been reading about is Hungary and Viktor Orban.
Viktor Orban?
Because he was early on. He was in 2010 that he got elected. What he did, I see as like a model that many of these type of leaders that are illiberal in many ways, is what they like to call themselves. And in many ways, like a Christian conservative revolution. And they're in the margins right now. But ever since Trump, and then Bolsonaro, and then Duterte, and then Modi, and then a bunch of other leaders around the world, they're like, we got something here.
Wasn't Duterte in power when Trump got into office?
Yes.
He was. Yeah,
he
and Poland
preceded
as well.
him.
He preceded him. Yeah, you're right. Yep. And then also, if I can add, too, Great Britain and Boris Johnson, which is a leader very much in this mold now.
Careful now, I like him.
You like him? But can I just add? That's
no,
okay.
absolutely. I'm just.
He's been taking on the BBC in a direct way, where many journalists now feel like we haven't been attacked like this in a long time, and now he's actually really exercising his power against Sajid Javid,
who was his own chancellor.
Yes, his own chancellor. He's telling him, "You will fire these people," and he said, "I will not do as you're telling me." Then he can resign, and it's like the same mold.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Boris Johnson is not like these guys in some ways, because he knows he has to tailor his politics to the British public in some ways.
He's got some limits on
he's got some limits on him, but not as many.
He's certainly pushing hard against them. Earlier this week, I think it was Monday.
We're recording on the 14th of February, by the way.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yay.
Better to spend on.
Well, I'll have a group smooch later, I guess, or something. Anyway.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm gay.
Oh, and you have standards too, I suppose.
I mean, I think that's really the salient point.
I have double standards because otherwise I wouldn't have any standards at all. I stole that from Dolly Parton said that about the men at the old Opry.
Womp womp.
They had those standards.
Johnson's government, I forget exactly what the briefing was about, but
He's blonde too.
They refused to allow BBC reporters into a government briefing, and the other journalists who were allowed into the room all left.
See, they didn't do that in this country when they did it to CNN. That's interesting that the British journalists stuck together.
Well, and we'll see how long they do stay together.
I was actually talking to someone about that a few days ago about the nature of the press in America versus the nature of the press in like other countries, and especially the White House press corps, which I think is very unique in how they can approach interviewing and how they have to approach things with kid gloves, because that is very special access, especially since they don't hold press briefings.
I think the Bushes started that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it used to be just the press would just gather in the State House or the lobby of the White House and just be like, can we talk to you for a little bit? Before they actually had the actual White House press corps.
The way it was back in the 1950s. And
exactly.
Earlier. Yeah.
They just were just hanging out, and like the press secretary or whoever would just come out and say like, "Hey, this is what's going on. We're done for today. Go home."
Yeah.
But I learned that from West Wing.
Now they tell them to go home, and it's a big lie because they have something that's breaking, but they don't want to. Yeah, it's wicked.
Yeah, but the thing that I was talking to my friend was, I wish that the White House press corps had the opportunity to have more backbone. So you would get up and Hope Hicks, or who's actually returning to the White House.
I heard that.
From Fox News. She's going to be in another department. She's not going to be in communications. But you would go up to whoever the press secretary is and say, and they would be like, well, the president said this, and then be like, no, excuse me, no, he didn't. He said this last week. And they're like, no, he didn't mean that. And we're like, I have a recording. I can play it for you. And when they get kicked out, then let's say CNN, he gets kicked out. The guy that works there, he gets kicked out, and CNN guarantees him a job someplace else. Maybe as a commentator, or maybe as something else, something
like
in
a
his
golden
field.
parachute.
Yeah, because
to protect them.
Yeah, exactly. And then you would just have another guy go in. Or have another person go in, whoever, and just have a conveyor belt. Okay, your White House credentials are kicked out. Okay, we're going to send in this guy, and then this person, and then this person. And then when the White House says CNN is barred from the building, then you say, oh, so you hate the press like this much, huh?
Right.
This much. And but the thing is, for that to work, every single outlet has to do that.
And they're all competing. They're going to be,
and that's it. But they have to worry about access. They have to, if you want to interview the president for anything, then you have to touch everything. Like, you can push a little bit, but you can't push that much because you're afraid, because that's your livelihood. Like, if you lose your press credentials and you're a White House, you're a political reporter, they're not going to let you in the State House.
Yeah.
So you need to have people need to have that guarantee that they don't lose. They're not going to completely lose everything if they actually are, instead of being hosts of evening talk shows or something, then they can actually be journalists.
Yeah.
And that's what we really need.
Yeah.
Have you seen Q&A, from Britain? When
All
they
the
put
time.
the
Prime Minister's
I
questions.
love that.
PMQs?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I wish that we could do that with
Yeah, because then they couldn't duck, right? They'd have to half an hour once a week.
I mean, that's the.
I love that. You find out a lot.
Well, that's the
and the fact that he has to know
Parliament.
what's going on in your district with this one hospital, explain where the funding's coming from and all of that. It's like, can you imagine?
That's the Parliament asking those questions. That's not the press, though.
No, but it's public. It
is
public.
public. The thing is, it wouldn't. I've thought about that a lot, especially like Obama did that a little, like a few years ago, 2013 or something, after a conference or something. He had like all these senators, and he just stood up at the podium and just answered questions. And I was like, can we do that all the time? But the problem is that the way that the government is set up, instead of having a parliamentary system where the prime minister would have information, like, and he affects not just the executive but the legislative as well. Since we have this split system, then asking the president this stuff, like he wouldn't be able to respond in the same way. The way that would be set up is like Senate Majority Leader questions and saying what's going on with this, because you ask the president like what's happening in this state. That's not really his job.
Clinton would have known. Bill Clinton would have known.
Yeah, I mean he could know, but like you can't. Like it's plus you have the federal versus state split, so you can't say what's going on in Kansas. What are you doing about it?
Well,
Be like, I can't do anything.
Scotland, he answers questions about all those.
Well, yeah, but they have a parliamentary system. It's like we have a split between the three branches. We also have the split between the states.
And they have a top-down system that is much more centralized in the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably, like the power of central government in the UK, you can stretch a line all the way back to William of Normandy in 1066. Like this whole top-down authority, and it's devolved from the monarch to the monarch's ministers. That's why it's prime minister. But in the end, it's still like one government from London. And there were one of the big changes, it was in the 18th century when Scotland basically had to give up its independent parliament in Edinburgh because, their national debt was too high. In England, basically, it's like bailed them out and got their parliament devolved.
But they've given them back, and also Wales too.
Well, but the thing is, like, they had this long history of how things evolved, and they had this strong centralizing influence all along. The United States was created whole cloth, like 245 years ago, 245 years ago. It's like, boom, done. Here it is. There we go. It's a country, and we're gonna, and they didn't want to have a centralized authority like they had in England.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they didn't want to have things be sort of the chaotic mess that they'd just seen with the Articles of Confederation. So they tried to split the difference. And I think part of the problem for the United States, or the way we are right now, is our system of government with the checks and balances is to some extent designed to stall.
I don't know if I said this on this show or the last show, but we have an adversarial government. We have a very adversarial government because we pit people against each other by design. We pit people because we have term limits, because we have different branches. We have the powers are split in like kind of odd ways between.
And then we split the legislature into two houses.
We have bicameral, and we have then the state
with different criteria for how they get elected.
Exactly, different criteria. So the House is concerned with every 2 years, and the Senate doesn't have to worry. And then you go back and forth with that. Then there's the other level of the state. The state is kind of expected to compete against the federal because they need money, they need power, things like that. They're kind of their own fiefdom.
They really are. Yeah.
I do a Twitch stream every like twice a week about politics, and I always say like we have a weird system because the whole point is because the states are supposed to be really powerful, and we cede more and more power to the federal, which I don't really mind, personally, because states, they can really suck, but.
Or they can be great.
But then you have the fight between the state and the federal. Then you have the local versus the state. And it's like our whole system is made up to
compete.
Let them fight.
They compete.
Let them fight. Yeah. Let them fight. And that's how we maintain control.
Like Ken Watanabe in Godzilla, right?
Yeah, he's just like up on a hill just looking at everything like, let them fight.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's great. And you can move to another state. If you don't like Massachusetts, you can go to New Hampshire and not have any benefits.
If everybody had like $1,000 a month, then you could do that.
Oh, good point. Can I return to something that Danny said earlier?
I don't know. It's this show. I keep talking. I'm sorry.
Keep going. No, there's no instruction. Go ahead, Sue.
So you were talking about how this wave has taken over the world, and I made you not say bad things about Boris Johnson, so I appreciate that you softened that a little little bit. But
even though Boris Johnson is terrible.
Mop-headed twit. How about that?
He delivered Brexit. That's what voters demanded, and Labour was divided on that issue because I still think Jeremy and his inner court. But go ahead, Sue.
Jeremy Corbyn absolutely shanked that whole thing. He's a pathetic
and you
failure.
should see him on Q&A. It's really hard to watch him ask his
I just want to say, did you see that hilarious bit of comeuppance that's already hit Boris Johnson and his fellow, uber rich, toffs, that whole jerk class in Britain? One of the things the rich, the super rich like to do is hide their money in tax havens because,
Can you say Cayman Islands?
Jerks. Yes. Well, exactly. The Cayman Islands are a British territory. So they were the preferred tax haven for British people with lots of money to hide. And
that's where I have my money.
Right. Well, they can't – they're not going to be able to do that anymore and maintain a close relationship with the EU because the EU is like, well, Britain's no longer in. You can't really sort of stick up for us not imposing scrutiny on the Cayman Islands. So now, it's going to be much harder to hide your money in the Cayman Islands if you have connections to Europe. And that's because Britain wasn't inside the tent to sort of say, no, leave them alone.
So that's sort of an example of what you were referring to is sort of this battle of the giants, but these dictators that are sort of growing up everywhere all over the world. And I suddenly thought of sort of when a company is in trouble, they bring in a hatchet man. And it's the stockholders that bring them in because they want them to redo the company. In some ways, what you're describing is that these countries are either electing or there's a power vacuum, and these really strong men are sort of, with very little ethics and morals, are taking over these countries. And the question is, what is it with these countries, with all our countries, that there's either a power vacuum or, some sort of something that's making people so fearful that they go to the strong man. There's something that's happening consistently. Is it climate change sort of in a subconsciousness that people are responding to, or is it just that we're in a period where, the EU wants to poke Britain in the eye, not just let them leave, but try and harm them on the way out? What is it that's going on between countries and in the world that's making that sort of...
I think one factor that has come to my mind across all of these countries is as the traditional political parties, the traditional elites, let's call it, in these countries, as their power base is reduced year after year, as people stop affiliating with the parties and the parties stop reaching out, I think what it allows is it creates a space for somebody who understands this new technology, social media, Facebook, Twitter, to go out there and begin to cultivate a new base of support. And look, and some people voted for Obama and then Trump. And I think what Trump and his supporters in his campaign were able to do is to say, how you oftentimes want to say what you feel, but you can't because everybody else around you is going to call you names? I feel it too, and I'm not afraid to say it. Somebody listening to that says, you know what? I feel like that at work. I feel like that at home. I feel like that. This is in all different countries who feel like something's repressing me and I want to lash out. Who's the angriest? And these guys are so corrupt. These elites are corrupt, and I know everybody's corrupt, and the political parties, they're corrupt. And so it
just feels so good to use anti-Semitic slurs again. Maybe next we can start using the N-word in public. Wouldn't that be great?
I was just going to say, my wife actually retweeted something that was really interesting. Prager. On his radio show, like PragerU, John Prager? I forget.
I think so.
I think, yeah.
I don't really respect him, so I don't care.
Yeah.
Doof Prager. That's what I'll call him.
There you go.
So someone called in because he said the K word, but then after that saying it, then he said the N word. Like he literally said N word. He didn't say it, but someone called in. It's like
he said, these N words.
I forget what the thing is, but someone called in. It's like you can say the K, but you're not saying the N. Why do you think it's okay to say the K word? And he says because the left. Right. Because if you use if you can actually say the N, if you actually do it, then you get attacked. and people don't like you, so you can't say it, and it's dystopian and whatever. He said it's idiotic that we can't say it, even if we're not calling someone that, we just talk about it. It's idiotic that I can't say it,
right.
And I'm like. And that's
and it goes
like
to
what you're
this free
talking
speech.
about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in their argument, I have a friend who listens to or like watches some of these programs, and he knows limits to bring up to me, but he loves to mention kind of the free speech. He feels that people on the right, the way they analyze it is, look, the country is changing. We have to get control over our borders, our control over all of these global capitalism, right? And they would argue, what about free speech? It's not in the constitutional sense necessarily, but in the sense of
culturally.
The cultural sense, to say free speech to, I have an individual right not to like you. People like Steve Bannon. I was watching a recent documentary with Errol Morris. I was watching his documentary, which is American Dharma, and I listened to Steve Bannon, and what he says about Republicans and conservatives, I almost think I'm listening to somebody from the left. He's extremely critical of Bush. I mean, he basically calls him a war criminal. Essentially, I don't think he would disagree with that. I think he says the wars and everything he did, he should pay a price. He is the worst. And he sees Hillary in that same vote because in his mind, he's not even thinking in traditional Republican and Democratic sense. He's thinking in elites versus anti-elites, and Trump is an anti-elite. So I will stay with Trump regardless of the consequences. And I know but Boris Johnson, where did he go to school? Where did he come from?
Oh, yeah.
Plenty of people in the upper areas outside of London. Again, it doesn't matter where they came from. It matters what he's willing to deliver for them.
Well, I just want to say that if someone
what he's willing to enable for them to do,
if your friend or if you're whoever, if they say, "What about free speech? I should be able to say anything I want," then I say go for it, because free speech doesn't mean you're free from consequences and you're afraid of the consequences. So if you want to change the world and you want to be able to say whatever you want, which is basically that sort of thinking is basically the effect of the white majority saying, "Oh, we can't do stuff that we used to do anymore, and now we're mad."
Because there's consequences now.
Because there's consequences now. And that, going back to your first question, that is part of it. And that is part of the appeal of Trump, because he's saying our country is not as good as it used to be. We should go back to when it was good, when we had manufacturing jobs and people had different water fountains. Like that's basically
didn't
what
have these persnickety bus boycotts.
Exactly. I mean, that's it. I don't know back that far, but like the thing is that when someone says, "I'm not able to do what I want, and I should be able to do that," but the left is keeping me from it. Nobody's keeping you from doing that.
Right.
You're just afraid of losing your job, or people getting mad at you, or something like that. Ostracism. If you and your conservative friends really care about free speech, if you really, really, really care, and you think that this is an attack on your freedom, and you think that you should push back, go ahead and see what happens.
I would just like to also, for your listeners, to consider, all right, so if any of your listeners are like, but I still want to be able to use the N-word, if only to talk about it and stuff like that, and
Oh, it's a lyric in a song.
Right,
I've heard that
exactly.
a lot.
Or anti-Semitic terms, like, well, it's important to like understand what we're talking about and whatever, and use nasty words about women too. And it's like, okay, great.
Isn't that what Snoop Dogg just did to Gayle King?
Oh my God,
that was really bad.
Snoop,
but
what are you doing? Free Bill Cosby! I swear to God.
But consider
he said that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, sadly.
I'm sorry, it's
disgusting.
But consider
so mad.
Consider the complaints about like, oh, this is impinging on our free speech. It's like it is in the same way that it's considered unacceptable for a kindergarten teacher to swear. The kindergarten teacher was like, okay, today we're going to read the story of Peter Rabbit and how that motherfucking rabbit is stealing the produce from hardworking Mr. McGregor. That rabbit, he's the worst. That rabbit, he's a N-word, really. It's all coded, whatever. Like, it'd be like, well, you can't say that in front of children, and that's horribly rude and impolite, and that's not getting along with people. That's attacking people, the way you're talking about them. And just imagine if instead of using the N-word, it's like, oh, yeah, you damn child rapist. Yeah. I mean, think how upset you would be if someone seriously said, you're nothing but a child rapist.
You mean like Elon Musk called that guy?
Yeah.
It's impugning the rights of women to not be able to walk around topless.
What? Child raping? What?
What?
No.
Ew, no. I'm saying in terms of the language. Get on board here. No.
Oh, I see. Okay. No, I was totally not following your logic. Yes.
Like, and if someone did that, or if someone was walking around in a Speedo and like around like a conservative hamlet, I don't know, man. Like places where like just down the street in a conservative area, they would flip out. But this is my freedom. Right. Why can't I do that? And it's legal. Like in New York, it's legal to do that.
Yeah.
So
it
what's
is.
your problem? It's because they're cowards.
No pants day on the subway?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They're cowards. You're cowards.
Well, and so
clip that. Put it on YouTube. I don't care.
In the same way that it would, you wouldn't call someone a child rapist unless you really meant it, unless you were prepared for the consequences and the blowback
lawsuit
of that. Yeah, well, not just lawsuit, being punched in the face or whatever. But if you were like, oh yeah, Roman Polanski, that's goddamn child rapist. Oh well, it's an established fact. He's a child rapist. So that's maybe awkward at the cocktail party, but it's true. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You said
if you don't know, now you know.
Oh my God!
But there are other slurs you could throw at Roman Polanski. That's fine. But so it's really just another way of thinking about what Genre was saying about how like you're just not willing to take the consequences of using an anti-Semitic slur or a racial slur or whatever. You're just upset that you can't now be like throwing out insults and terrible accusations at people and demeaning people with the way you talk about them and get away with it and not even be questioned by it. Yeah. And that is what is the disingenuous, quote unquote, conservative attitude about free speech is really about. Is they don't like it when people push back and they want to be the bullies in the conversation. They don't want to actually be on a level playing field. And it can be difficult. It's sometimes tough to be thoughtful and considerate of other people. But if you're going to be an adult in a society that has a large population with lots of different kinds of people and lots of different kinds of ways of being a person in it, have to do that.
Mike, are you saying that we live in a society?
We absolutely do.
And
we've got to be civil about it. Darn it!
There you
Sue,
go.
do we live in a society?
I think it depends how you define it. I've actually got another question for...
How would you not define what?
We may not live in the same society. What can I say?
Oh, we don't live in the same circumstances. I agree. That's a whole different thing. It's the same reason why I think Black Lives Matter is such an important movement. Because, like, I live in a very different social milieu to Genre because I'm not afraid of the cops if they pull up behind me just to tell me, like, you've got a busted taillight. Yeah. Genre... unfortunately, and buddy, if I hadn't said this enough, it really, really sucks, and it's not fair and it's not right that you are afraid for your life. But it is smart. You are rational to feel that way.
I've been afraid
of. Sorry.
I've actually been afraid of the police in general since 1992 when I saw the Rodney King riots, getting his ass whooped
by the police,
and then the riots, and then I'm like, oh. I was like 12. It's like, cool.
I graduated from college 2 months after those riots, and it was like, oh my God. I had no idea America was so broken. I was a wasp from New England. What did I know? I'm just saying.
Yeah, so
I was going to return to the scene of the crime. So you described sort of the breakdown of the political parties, the elites versus the non-elites.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out, we've talked about this before, but when you look at the front runners in both political parties, which may be failing, maybe part of it is, Trump was not a Republican. He's
Good
been
point.
a Democrat. Bloom's
Either by membership or by attitude
Yep,
in a lot of ways.
Yep. Bloomberg
Right.
is, Republican, independent. Bernie Sanders is not of the Democratic Party.
Right.
It's just, you look at that and you go, even the parties are struggling with people internal and external to them. Your description of it is a breakdown, so that the parties aren't functional anymore. And it does kind of go back to the author. But when the parties cease to function and provide something and comfort and lack of fear, and then all of the society breaks down. Yeah. And then people are sort of on their own. And where do they go? They go to their tribe.
Yeah, they go to their tribe. Yeah.
We might be seeing we might be existing in a party shift right now, just like what happened in the 60s, what happened throughout the
1860s and the 1960s.
Exactly. We might be experiencing the beginning of a shift in values of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party.
Both of them are fragmented.
And we might be seeing a more of an adoption of ranked choice voting or something, because we might be seeing the splintering of parties. Like, I see people that are really into Trump as just a separate party. They're not really Republicans. They're Trumpists, and
my mother, the lifelong Republican, feels the same way.
Yeah,
she's like, I don't see anything that I recognize in any of these prominent Republicans, with the exception of Mitt Romney, in part because of his willingness to say, we have standards, we have principles, and what do on some level, you just have to say no to criminality.
Well, you guys have heard me say this before, but when you torment me about being in the Republican Party, and I refer to Wind in the Willows, and the weasels have taken over Toad Hall, and we need the Badgers, and we need to, sort of retake it. But I think your point is really well taken about the parties being sort of elite versus non-elite.
And if I could just add, I just think it's part of this breakdown. Yes, it's a process going on for the last 40 or 50 years, but I also think technology has played a role where individuals feel like they can openly say anything, and so anybody can claim to be a journalist, a blogger, an informed person, and a lot of people now have so much more options to amass information, that they're amassing a lot of information that who knows who's really producing it, right? It could be a human, it could be a person abroad trying to just sow dissent and chaos.
Could be some yokels on the radio.
On the radio, exactly. It could be anything, but so I don't know how many times
we're reaping the benefits and the consequences. The consequences, positive and negative, or however you want to describe them, the bugs and the features of the dissolution of societal gatekeepers. If you want to watch television news, in the 1970s when I was a kid, there were 4 networks.
Why did you say it like that?
What?
Television news.
I don't even know what you're talking about. So I guess that's how I did it. Yes. One did go to prep school. Perhaps one has mentioned that from time to time. But there are all kinds of problems with, if you look back to Walter Cronkite and the news of that era. It's all white guys. They're all
talking about what white guys have done,
right? And a certain like it's excluding so much, and it's not talking about the lived experience and the many struggles and challenges faced by all sorts of people around the country and around the world. And a lot of questions aren't being asked about, why are we killing all these people in Southeast Asia? What's the point of having a secret bombing campaign in Cambodia? Like, why does that even sound like a good idea to somebody? All of that. But at the same time, when you get rid of those gatekeepers, when you allow people like, Amy Goodman and Noam Chomsky to have on the same kind of footing, to be just as accessible as the voice of authority, well, that's great. It means that people can get the word out, and people like me can find out, can have our consciousness raised about why there's a Black Lives Matter movement. How things like what happened to Rodney King or Amadou Diallo or Trayvon Martin aren't sad exceptions, like disgusting relics of an era that's all too slowly dying out, but rather, no, that's business as usual. It's the same old crap, and now we're just able to let you know if you're willing to bother to listen.
Well, how do you
that's great, but on the other hand, it means that Rush Limbaugh can have the same kind of platform, and some crazy guy from Stormfront, Joe Nazi 666 on 4chan, you know?
Yeah, and I was going to say, how do you titrate it? Because if it made it to the 6 o'clock news in the 1950s and 60s, you figured it was important.
Right.
Now it's very hard.
Multiple levels.
Yeah. How do you know what's important, and how do you know
what
what's
does Kim
true?
Kardashian have to say?
Well, yeah, that also competes.
But to get someone out of jail.
Right, and like, hey, that's a cool thing.
What were you saying, Sue? Sorry.
I sort of forgot. Because you said Kim Kardashian, and you know me, I'm such a pop culture creature.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You've got a crush on her, don't you? Just admit it.
I don't quite. I kind of know who they are. I don't really know who they are. That's how bad it is.
Okay.
But that's sort of...
Just wait, I'll be there too.
But that media, that blossoming of all the media and the ability to sort through it, and John set up a system where we had to all agree to what media we'd refer to. And it was a hard thing to do because, you know, we all had problems with a lot of them. And you know, who actually represents the truth? It's almost impossible to tell.
Yeah, we actually did a forum. We had a survey and we just all submitted like a bunch of news organizations. And I put them into a form, and everybody had to vote. And if anybody said no to one of them, then it got thrown out. If you go on civilpoliticsradio.com, then we have a list of those trusted news sources, and with the amount of information that's out, it's shockingly small. With the news places that we agree are good sources of hard news and analytics, and so yeah. Anyway, sorry.
And you can use it to search. So if you're not sure if a story is true, once it sort of shows up on these, it's probably pretty well vetted, or there'll be a retraction in a few days. But yeah, it was hard to do.
Yeah,
because it's, you know, sometimes you see a story, even in the New York Times. I mean, the thing they did with Hillary, saying that she was under indictment or something, and then had to retract
I'm
it.
About to take off the New York Times, honestly.
But you know, all that stuff, and there's so much mishigas right now. It's really it's hard to sort through. So sometimes you even wonder what you believe.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Wow.
Yeah, and you know, we thought about adding Fox News, and I was just like, I just don't feel good about it. But in a way, like, we still have to kind of pay attention to what Fox News does, because they're just...
I watch it all the time, so you
don't
have to.
They drive the discourse, you know? Like, they have an influence.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same way, like, I don't think we can take the New York Times off, because we're never going to be able to just ignore the New York Times.
Well, we don't have to refer to the New York Times, or we don't have. Let's use it. We don't have to refer to Fox News as a source. We can refer to them, like sometimes I post on our Twitter, like, this is what Fox News said, but we don't have to take their word for it. The New York Times, they do reporting. They most of the time do good reporting. There are some times when they're just off the wall bonkers, especially in their opinions section. But that's we can still refer to Fox News. We just don't lionize them.
So one last thing I want to say, because I can see people's eyes are rolling, but just there's a new podcast I just started listening to called Drilled. It's about sort of the concentrated media efforts of climate deniers. And their current sort of set of episodes, they're looking at the sort of creation of the public relations business, and specifically how it was created by the oil industry to basically cover up their misdeeds, starting with Rockefeller.
So what you're saying is we
murdering people at a union strike in Colorado. You know.
So what you're saying is that after everybody listens to Collateral Banter, after you go through all the archives and make sure that you've caught up,
of civil politics,
after that, then they can use that. Like if you drive a lot, then you have 3 podcasts that you can listen to. But there is an order to where you should start.
Well, I mean, you know, you probably also should check out Star Trek Picard too.
Oh, I like that.
That's not a podcast.
It's a great show, though.
Wait,
God, it is.
You mean I shouldn't be watching that while I drive?
Oh my God, I hate everything.
Oh my God.
Thank God you got one of those newfangled cars. It drives itself.
You mean one with Smart Pack?
The Smart Pack, yeah.
Okay, we're devolving. I'm sorry.
I'd rather be wicked.
No, he
than
dropped
woke.
out of the primary.
Okay.
All right. Well, that wraps up
Cut off your mic
56,
again.
57,
If you say so, it's your
58.
show, man.
I don't know. At this point, we could be here until 2 in the morning. and we'll just, I've done like 10 episodes in 3 hours. That's okay.
We haven't been here for 3 hours.
I'm saying we could be though.
Feels
Oh
like
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
We could be.
I'm
We
looking
could
forward
be.
to it all snipped up into neat, tidy sections about
Ooh.
topics.
Ooh,
He'll snip it up into neat, tidy sections.
I think like 30-second blocks, wherever, right in the middle of it. So Boris Johnson, bloop, that's it. That's where it stops. The next episode will begin right there. So no,
Mr. Phillips,
30
so you come to us for to advertise what is it that you have to advertise? Well, I've inherited 2,000 miles of string, but unfortunately, due to an error in planning, it's all in 6-inch lengths, so it's not very useful.
There you go.
What?
It's a Monty Python sketch.
Everything's a Monty Python sketch.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you
your
for
show.
being on my show.
Yeah, thank you
well,
for
no,
having
I'm also thanking you for having me
Yeah,
on your show.
You're very
we will-
welcome.
Great
Appreciate it.
time.
Thank you. I had
We
fun.
we're really
Yeah.
appreciative of you being on Civil Politics. You
Yeah.
added a lot.
Thank you.
And we're really happy to be on Collateral Banter.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome for being on my show, and you're welcome for me being on your show.
There it is. There it is.
All right. Take care.